that's important to think about is where you're going to place pathways in a room. Hi everyone, it's Carol from Discover Interior Design, and I'm so glad you're here. In this video, we're going to talk about circulation paths, or pathways that we have in our rooms and in our home to help us move from one area to another, and the importance of planning that ahead of time in our room so that everything flows really easily. So let's get started. So when we're doing space planning, we need to think about where we're going to place all of the furniture, for instance, in a room. But the other important part that we need to think about is leaving space for pathways. So areas where we can move around in our rooms and in our home. And these pathways are sometimes referred to as circulation paths, or circulation flow, or sometimes I even talk about walkways. And really what they are just spaces set aside just for movement so that we can move from one area of a room to another area of a room, or move from one room to another. And these pathways are space that we set aside just for movement. We don't have anything else inside that space, and so they are free and clear of any obstructions, and ideally they are straightforward. They just have this really natural flow to them so that we really don't have to think about anything. So a really good example of that is if you have a hallway in your home. Right away, that hallway is already built in for you. It's a built-in pathway where we just, move up and down that hallway to other parts of our home. And we don't have to think twice about it. We just kind of stay on that path and it leads us to where we want to go. And, there are different types of pathways in our home. And in this video, we're going to concentrate on just the main pathways, the main circulation paths that we have in our home, because other examples of pathways could be, a seating arrangement where you need to move from one area of that seating arrangement to another area of the seating arrangement. But in this video, we're going to talk about the main pathways in our home and what to think about when we are space planning and how to create space just for these pathways. So there are three things that you can think about when we're thinking about setting aside space for pathways. The first thing is to take a look at your room and decide what pathways you need in that room. So for instance, in a living room, some examples of pathways that you may need would be from your front door into the room, or from your front door to get to the other room on the other side, or to the hallway, or even to a stairway. In a bedroom, that may mean a pathway from your doorway to your bed, or your doorway to a closet, or maybe you have a bathroom in your bedroom, so you'd want to have a clear, unobstructed pathway to the bathroom. Or say in an open concept room where you have different functions going on in a room. You have a living room area, a dining room area, and maybe a kitchen. And you want to have pathways to get from one end of the room to the other. And you want them to be easy to find and easy to follow, and everything is straightforward and there's nothing obstructing any, movement within those paths. So after you have an idea of what pathways you really need in your room, then you want to think about what are some routes that you can create for those pathways. And the goal with this is really to create something that makes sense, that has a nice flow to it, that we're not having to think about things too much, that it's pretty straightforward. And we're thinking about these pathways, the placement of these pathways, these main pathways, way before we even decide where to place all of our furniture. Because if we decided to create a furniture arrangement and just kind of plop that inside our room, we may create a setup that creates a pathway that may be kind of convoluted, kind of take us around in this route that's not really straightforward, and we have to kind of think about it a lot. Well, we want the direct path. We want something that we don't have to think about and go around in circles and take different detours everywhere in our room. We just want to be able to not think about it and move directly from one area of the room to another room in an easy way. So let's take a look at a couple of examples of where we can see some really nice, easy flow pathways and maybe some pathways that wouldn't be as straightforward and not a direct route into different areas of a room or a home. This room is a really great example of a really straightforward route that we can see, pathway that we can see that goes from the front door all the way over to the other areas of this home. And we don't have to think about anything. It's set up in a really natural way and just a really straightforward way that we just kind of follow along and we know where to go. It leads us into the living room area and then it leads us into the other areas of the home. And if this living room was set up differently, and say we set up this living room furniture arrangement a little bit differently, we moved it to the other wall, we moved it to where the TV is on the right side of the room. And what would happen then? Well, that would mean that our pathway, our main pathway to get to the other parts of the room would be a little bit more convoluted. We would arrive in this living room and then notice that there is a big seating area right there in front of us, kind of blocking us to other parts of the room and other parts of the home that we can see, that we would have to go kind of in a curvilinear manner and go around that whole seating arrangement. It's a little bit convoluted and we have to kind of think about things a little bit. And we could totally do that, but is that the best way to plan out that room? Probably not. Going back to their original design, going back to that original layout where that pathway is straightforward. We can easily get into the living room and easily get to the other parts of that home makes a lot more sense. And as a side note, is this best setup where you have a group of people sitting in the sectional and sofa area and watching TV, and then someone else will arrive in the room and they may have to walk in front of the TV. Well, ideally it would be great not to have a main pathway in front of the TV, but it's not such a big deal that you can kind of work around that just every once in a while where maybe someone would walk in front of that TV. And then in this bedroom, we can see that there are clear pathways. We can see when we're standing in that room, we can see the clear pathway that leads us over to either side of the bed and also leads us over to where the bathroom door is. And that makes sense. We don't have to think about it too much. We just know and follow that pathway, and we know that it will lead us into the direction, into the destination where we want to go. And sometimes when we are deciding on the placement of pathways, there may be one that's a little bit better than the other, or maybe they're kind of the same. And so if we were to place this bed on a different wall where it would change the route, the placement of that pathway, it would still work. We would still be able to get over to the bed or walk around the bed to get over to the bathroom. It wouldn't be as direct. So when you're thinking of the placement of pathways, there may be more than one option, and one may be a little bit better than the other, or maybe they're kind of the same. So it's up to you to decide which one may work better in your room and with the furniture and layout that you have. And so the third thing to think about is making sure that your pathways are wide enough. And a general guideline is to make sure that your pathways, your main pathways, are at least 36 inches wide or 91.44 centimeters wide. And this is just a good average general guideline to go by, that pathway is 36 inches wide, and so there's nothing inside that 36-inch wide area of space. And so for instance, in this living room, since the furniture arrangement is in the middle of the room, we can see that there are main pathways on either side of that furniture arrangement. And it looks like to me that there is probably 36 inches on either side. So free and clear. So someone can easily walk around those sofas or walk around and get to the other side of the room. And there's nothing obstructing those pathways, and they are very direct and very straightforward. And that's a good example of where we're creating pathways in between different elements that are stationary. So a hall has walls. Those are stationary walls, and so that's really straightforward. And in this furniture arrangement, those sofas are stationary. Yes, we can move them around, but after we set them up, they're stationary. They don't move around anymore. And so that's a really straightforward way just to make sure that there's 36 inches free and clear for someone to move around those pieces of furniture. The other type of pathways that we may have are pathways that are next to things that move around. And examples of that would be chairs. So like a dining room chair or even like an office chair. So in this example, we can see that there's a stairway and then there's a main pathway that goes by this dining room area leading to the living room area. And from what I can tell, there's more than 36 inches of width in between that table and the stairway. There's probably maybe even 42 inches or 48 inches. And so plenty of room for someone to just move around that dining room table. One thing that we need to keep in mind when you are putting a pathway, a main pathway next to something that moves, like a dining room chair, we need to make sure that we leave plenty of room for the movement of that chair. So with a dining room table or even like an office desk, you want to make sure that you have a minimum of 36 inches out from the edge of that table or out from the edge of your desk to accommodate the movement of that chair, to set up an area that someone could sit there in that chair and then someone else could move around them and behind them easily without having to squeeze by, especially on a main pathway. So even in this living room, for instance, where they have a home office area, you would want to make sure that there's 36 inches out from that desk to have plenty of room for someone to be sitting in that chair, and then ideally 36 inches out from that area so someone could move behind that person and move over and sit down in the sofa. One room where maybe they need more space or need to kind of reconfigure where they place their furniture is this room. And we can see there's a main pathway that probably leads from a front door, and it leads you past the dining room area, past the kitchen area, over to the living room area in the back. And so right now it looks great, and there probably is around 36 inches of width for that area. But what happens if someone sits down in the chair at the table or sits down on a stool at the countertop? Well, right away, those chairs are going to impede on that pathway, and it may be a little bit tricky to, easily move by or in between those different areas. That's a good example of where that main pathway is actually in a good location. It makes sense. It's straightforward. It's a direct route to take you through that entire space. But you may have to rethink how you place that furniture so that it works a little bit better. So before you place all of your furniture in your room, think about the main pathways that you need in that room, and be sure to set aside space so that it's easy to move in that room and easy to move to other areas in your home. So I'd love for you to take a moment in your busy day and to notice main pathways in your home, or even when you're out and about, and just take notice of how easy the flow is, where you can just follow along that pathway and get from one area to another easily. And in your home, if there is something that's not quite working, that you're kind of having to think about how to get from one area to another and that main pathway isn't very clear, is there some way that you can kind of move things around just to create a more straightforward path? straightforward route to get from one area to another. And if you have any ideas about pathways and making sure that we leave space for movement in a room and in our home, please share your design ideas in the comments. Thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
You